cameras in both the House of Commons and indeed the House of Lords. And so for about 10 years, you watched until the House of Lords became an electable chamber, or a chamber that was appointed, apparently more fairly by the government. We watched as these old men, and indeed women, were sitting in these red benches, beautiful plush red benches, falling asleep. So my great-grandfather would have fitted in perfectly had he moved from the House of Commons to the House of Lords. My great-grandfather used his wit and also his wisdom very much in his personal life as well. One of my favourite stories about Winston Churchill was during the Second World War. The family was sitting around the table and they were all talking and very excitedly talking about what was going on and everything like that. But my great-grandfather was sitting at the end of the table just playing with his food, his head down, in one of his very depressive Black Dog days. Anyway, a gentleman called Vic Oliver, who was an out-of-work amateur dramatic artist, and he had married Sarah Churchill, and it was a marriage that my great-grandparents were not pleased about, because he had eloped, and their daughter had eloped, but they didn't feel that the marriage was actually going to work. They didn't feel that Vic Oliver was a serious man in any shape or form. So basically they had advised her against it, and she had gone against them and just eloped and married. He was sitting around the table at the time, and Vic Oliver decided he was going to try and cheer my great-grandfather up. So he looked at him and he said, "Papa, in your view, who is the greatest politician alive today?" My great-grandfather looked up from his food. Big smile appeared on his face. His eyes went wide and lit up as he said, "Benito Mussolini." Put his head back down. Naturally, the room went completely silent. Nobody was prepared for the fact that Churchill was going to choose a fascist. Even Vic Oliver thought that Churchill would choose himself as opposed to choosing anyone else. But being the idiot that he was, Vic Oliver decided he was going to press the fact and said, "Papa, I don't understand. Why on earth did you choose a fascist?" My great-grandfather's face came back up. Big smile. As he looked at him and said, "Because Benito Mussolini is the only leader to have had the prerequisite courage to have his son-in-law shot." The marriage ended shortly afterwards. But if Vic Oliver didn't know what his in-laws thought of him, he certainly did at that point. Judge Landrum, I have never been inside a courtroom, so I have no idea whether the opportunity arises for you to actually be able to use your wit at all. But I'm sure that there are occasions that you have the opportunity to do it. I'm sure that there are times that you really wish you could, but you have to bite your tongue. Your wisdom, however, from conversations that I've had with people who know you, people who highly recommend you, which incidentally is absolutely every single person I've spoken to about you, has highly recommended you. They all speak of your wisdom. They all speak of your integrity and your honesty. Your wisdom is clearly employed in everything that you do in your courtroom, in every case that you see, and with regards to dealing with every single individual that comes before you. My great-grandfather once said, "I was brought up in my father's house to believe in democracy. Trust the people." That was his message. Therefore, I have steered confidently towards the Gettysburg ideal of government of the people, by the people, for the people. My great-grandfather was one of the last politicians of his kind. He truly represented the people, the electorate, and Britain above all else. He very much enjoyed the hustle and bustle of elections, as indeed many politicians do. However, my great-grandfather saw it only as a means to an end. He didn't care about titles. He just wanted to serve. This was very much proven when Her Majesty the Queen tried to persuade my great-grandfather, or rather she sent over several civil servants to go to number 10 Downing Street to talk to my great-grandfather about accepting an honour, accepting the Knight of the Garter, which is the highest award that could be given by the British monarch to a commoner. My great-grandfather kept refusing. He kept maintaining that it was the people of Britain and the nations around Europe that actually fought the war, and that he had actually done nothing. to his grave, he honestly believed exactly that. The civil service were completely exasperated, and they returned to Buckingham Palace and told the Queen he has refused. So the Queen herself picked up the telephone, and she phoned Downing Street. She spoke to my great-grandfather. I would imagine she probably wasn't put on hold. Sorry, I've got a bee in my bonnet about that. I've just been on the phone to Comcast for most of the day, and it's been I'm sure you can imagine. Sometimes I wish I was the Queen of England. Well, actually the King of England. But hey, I live in Montrose, so... Anyway, the Queen phoned my great-grandfather personally. She didn't do it through her secretary or anything like that. She actually knows how to dial a telephone. It was amazing. And she phoned my great-grandfather. And she basically told him, Winston, if you don't come to Buckingham Palace and accept this honour, then I'm going to come to Downing Street and I'm going to bestow it upon you there. Well, my great-grandfather was a man of honour. He was a man of integrity and certainly a man of tradition. And he knew that this would be the most humiliating thing for him to allow the Queen to come and visit him at number 10. So immediately, reluctantly, he accepted the honour and hot-footed it over to Buckingham Palace. And that is how he became Sir Winston Churchill. But he believed he wanted to remain Mr. Winston Churchill. He was a man, as I say, of complete humility. Sorry. Speeches can be a pain in the neck. Judge Landrum, like my great-grandfather, truly represents the people he is responsible for, and very much believes in the impartiality in deciding matters without regard to partisan interests, media coverage, or outside influence. Judge Landrum sees both sides of the argument, as indeed did my great-grandfather. And there's a great example of my great-grandfather seeing both sides of the argument. It's a very, very famous story, and I'm sure that many of you have heard it. Some of you may have heard it, but it has been misquoted on occasion. But I'm going to tell it again, so please bear with me. Have any of you heard of the former Member of Parliament, Bessie Braddock? Okay, great. This is a new story. My great-grandfather, the story goes, and it's a true story, it was about 3 o'clock in the morning, and Parliament used to sit until 3 o'clock in the morning. It wasn't unusual for a vote to go through at 2:30. You know, in those days you didn't have television, so you didn't have soap operas and things like that. What else are you going to do? I mean, you know, if you can't watch the latest instalment of Doctor Who, or, you know. So Parliament used to sit till 2:30 in the morning. And on this one occasion, my great-grandfather had arrived at the Parliament building fairly early in the morning. And so he was very, very tired. And naturally, yes, he had been to the bar. And he had enjoyed a few drinks and certainly, you know, needed to go home at some stage. But this was about 3 in the morning. And he started to walk through the halls of Westminster on his way out towards his apartment at home, in London. And he was accosted by this terrible woman, this socialist member of Parliament, who was an absolute militant. Her name was Bessie Braddock, and she was terrible. She was one of our first female members of Parliament, and indeed almost one of our last, because of the attitude that she had. And she stopped him, and she shouted at him, "Winston, you are drunk. Not only are you drunk, but you are disgustingly drunk." Well, my great-grandfather looked round. Big smile. He said to her, "Indeed, I may be drunk, man. And you are ugly. Not only are you ugly, but you are disgustingly ugly. However, tomorrow, I will be sober." It may interest you to know that he and Bessie Braddock never spoke again. And they were both in Parliament for some time to come.